Are you Rebecca? Yes. Okay.
Right.
She's always been like a 30-year-old stuff. She's 23. Just only a couple years ago.
Outrageous.
Yeah. She said, oh, it's not a lot. Oh my God. That's what Lena keeps saying. You know what I told her? Yeah. I told her. Yeah.
Hi, David. How are you? David, are you able to hear me? Hello, how are you? There are name tags at the back whenever you get yourself settled in. We'll wait like 2-3 more minutes. Oh, it's tonight? I'm sorry. Oh, so you're good. Great. I like Bunny, you know.
Too bad with the Olympics.
Six.
I haven't learned the rules of.
Right.
You could enjoy it more. That's what's
right.
Every 20 years I learn something new.
All right, I think, can you hear me? Yep, okay. All right, I think we will start, everyone. Oh, good. Hi, Savannah.
Hey, sorry I'm late.
Oh, you're good, we're just starting. Well, welcome everybody, great to see you all again. Couple housekeeping things. First, I wanted to make sure there was an issue with the Miller program's website last week. Have you all been able to get on and at least register? Everyone's good with that? Okay, super, great. Second thing is the syllabus. So I just got the syllabus. They sent me a new revised syllabus that would match your book, but they didn't send me an editable one until like maybe 20 minutes before class. So I will work on that tomorrow so it matches. So you'll be able to get rid of the old syllabus. It'll match the dates, the readings, and everything. It's everything the same, but the titles will match with the book that you have. So know that that will be coming tomorrow. And then the third thing is I sent it the whole class, but it really is only students who are, looking to convert. The Rabbi Walk wanted to get some information from you. So if you could, I've only gotten like 3 of them. So if you could, whoever that refers to, you could try to fill that out. If you don't have the email, just shoot me an email tomorrow. Say totally forgot, don't know where it is, and I'll resend it to you. Because he really does want to try to reach out to those people in the next like couple weeks or so. So that would just be super helpful. So thank you. Those are my housekeeping things. Any questions about any of those things? Okay, fantastic. All right. So as I said, there'll be name tags every week, just so until we kind of all get to know each other. So those will be available in the back. And I just want to kind of start with another icebreaker because part of this is like to get to know each other. So the question for today is, what's your favorite aspect of Judaism that you have experienced so far? What's your favorite aspect of Judaism that you've experienced so far? And we'll just kind of go around. You can share if you're not sure, that's also fine, and you can totally pass. And that's an okay answer. We can start the left, right, or in the center. Yes. In life, wherever you are. If you've been Jewish your whole life, if you're in the middle of your Jewish journey, wherever you are, just Jewish experience that you've had so far. Your favorite aspect of Judaism you've experienced. You want to start, or should I go this side? Oh, I love it. Thank you. Thanks for sharing. Great. Foods and favorite foods, huge part of Judaism. Absolutely. Go ahead. Lovely. Thank you. Oh, nice. Great. Thank you. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Your fellow Israelis don't feel like
Got it. Stephanie. Yes. Oh, I love that. And that's huge in Judaism, right? Asking questions. Don't just take it at face value. Absolutely. And charity. Great. Thank you.
Yeah, the family, the communal support, and grill and here and garlic anywhere in the world that you go.
I love it. Thank you.
I was also going to say the feeling of belonging in Israel.
Nice.
I was going to say, like, the traditions of Passover, not, but what really shaping me as a Jew is actually USY.
Great. So for those of you who don't know, USY stands for United Synagogue Youth, which is youth group. It used to be 9 through 12. I think maybe now it's 8 through 12, but yeah, youth group. Great. Wonderful. Thank you. Great. Thank you. Beautiful.
New York and like Morocco, like connected to that one thing.
Absolutely. I love it. You don't have to be different. I mean, it's fine. It's totally fine. Great. Which one? Oh, I worked there for a few years. I'm from Philly, so yeah. Nice. Wonderful. Thank you. That's awesome. Love these. Love them. Thank you. Great. Thank you. The fact that you guys have just like said that feeling welcome, that just makes me feel it so good. Like, I'm so glad that that is the feeling you have when you come here. So that's amazing. We were just talking about, what is your favorite aspect of Judaism that you've experienced so far in your life? Yeah. So as you know, it's a lot. Yes. Of course. Go ahead.
I was stationed in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
So we had to arrange for a Christian walk.
Mm.
So, it's not like you're stationed. But anyhow, it came
down to two.
Okay,
One guy was a shuffle in Strasbourg.
which is someone who's a slaughterer, right? Who properly kills meat so it's kosher.
And the other one was Professor Emeritus. There was too much irony involved with that. So we went with the bringing professor. So we had to wait an extra day on our son's teaching lobby. Couldn't travel.
Shabbat.
From
Mm-hmm.
So we're all at the synagogue, and it's like the synagogue in Strasbourg is attached to the Israeli council. We got a lot of these ski working that type of thing around there. Anyway, he gets there and this little frail old man. I mean, he would be somewhere between 80 and 500 people. I mean, he's old.
It's pretty old, 18,500.
Anyhow, he comes in, and we make necessary instructions. Okay. And he goes in and he's walking in his hand and going like this. Oh boy.
Oh, God.
And he goes, "Oh, all right, so when he got in and he started with the hook up and he started doing it, no problem.
Oh, I love that.
He did it instead of like took an eyedropper, line and put it in the front box.
Mm-hmm.
And he did it, bouncing around. Yeah, but that's part and parcel of being a Greek law. This was considered a mitzvah because it was the first Greek law or any kind of ceremony that this synagogue had in the winter. 1984.
Mm-hmm.
So they wouldn't let us pay for Dr. Oliver's thing. They wouldn't let us donate to the synagogue. Right? And there were probably 100 people there, of which I knew maybe 15.
We're all celebrating with you. I love that. That's beautiful. Thank you.
On a certain level, that's better than.
And Jonathan, do you want to, so the question was, what is your best or favorite Jewish experience thus far? Holiday meals. Absolutely. Great, thank you. Thank you all for sharing. It also helps me get to know all of you as well.
What's yours?
It's a great question. What's my favorite aspect? So here's the interesting thing. I to be honest, one of my favorite, aside from spending time with family, which is obviously hugely important to me, I think it was the 5 years in rabbinical school, because those 5 years, you go to college for 4 years, you're with a lot of people and everything. But when you're in rabbinical school, you're obviously all focused on the same, end goal, becoming a rabbi. You share similar beliefs. A lot of people have similar backgrounds, and you are going through, as much as you're going to get to know each other in this one class. Like I took classes with these people for 5 years, talking about everything in your life, your hopes, your dreams, your fears, all of the things. And those are still to this day my closest friends. So that has in so many ways shaped who I am and my rabbinate. And those are the people I still go to when I have questions. And so, although I do love Temple Israel and I love my time here, that is one very big thing in my life. Just don't tell that to everybody else. Okay, so we are going to get to ancient Israel. But before we get to ancient Israel, we are going to have a little bit of a tour through the Tanakh. So let me tell you what the Tanakh is. We have 5 minutes here, so we will have to kind of get into little bit pass it along. But so we started, the Tanakh has 3 parts. So we started last week with the first part, which was the Torah. So if you actually go into your 1 foot, on 1 foot on page 26, and again, this is, your book to write in. So this would be the place where it says Tanakh. I'm going to tell you what that stands for. All right. So the reason that certain letters are also big is because these are the letters that for the acronym. It makes kind of more sense in Hebrew. So this is the Torah. This is what we talked about. There are 5 books in the Torah. Then we get to the next part, which we're going to talk about today, which is Nevi'im, which is prophets. There are 21 books in Nevi'im. And then the next is the K, which is, Ketuvim, which means writings. Anybody know how many books in writings? How many altogether? 13. 13 close. 13. So the total for all of these, for the math people, is 39. There we go. Okay. Total of 39 books in the Tanakh. So often you will hear people just referring to like the 5 books of the Torah, because we read the Torah every week. But really, so when the Jewish people refer to the Hebrew Bible, it would be where in the Christian world is the Old Testament, but we don't have a New Testament. So we just have the Tanakh, which is all. They're all, even though some of them are different publishing houses, they're all the same. So this one is all in English. This one is, maybe if you can pass it along, it will go here for you guys. This is English and Hebrew. This one, it calls it the Holy Scriptures. This one, I think, is just English. This is English and Hebrew, and this is Crew, and this is English and Hebrew. So you can take a look at it, pass it along. It'll make a little bit, if you've never seen it, it'll make a little bit more sense as we go through everything. Okay, so these 3 parts, so as I said, this part is the prophets and then Ketuvim. So for those of you, I'm sorry, who have the ones with Hebrew and English, you're going to go right to left. So Hebrew goes right to left. If it's just English, it's just regular English left to right. So that'll also help guide you through it. All right, so now you know, so mine is all written over, but if you want to turn to page, or on the other side of page 27, I just want to give you like kind of a brief guided brief tour through Nevi'im and Ketuvim. So there are 4 types of literature in these 2 books. There's history, prophecy, wisdom literature, and poetry. So Nevi'im, so the ones that are history, if you want to just write like, H or something, is the book of Joshua, Judges, 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, 1 Kings, and 2 Kings. Those are all historical. Then you're going to move down. All of the rest from Isaiah to Malachi are all prophecy. So then if you move, and we'll come back to Nevi'im again. I just want to go through all of these. So then if you move over to Ketuvim, there's a bunch of different things in here. So some of it in here is poetry and some is wisdom literature. Wisdom literature is things like the second one, book of Proverbs, the third one, the book of Job, and in the middle where it says Ecclesiastes. Those are wisdom literature. Wisdom literature is really like, how do we live well in this world? Things about good sense, moral judgment, the meaning of one's experience of life and religion. So those are those sections. And if you go on the top, Psalms is book of poetry. The 4th one down, the Song of Songs, also a book of poetry. The next one is Megillat Ruth. We're going to talk about what a Megillah is. So we'll just call it the Book of Ruth right now. So it's kind of prose and a little bit of wisdom literature, some people consider it. Lamentations is poetry. Esther is considered superior wisdom of Jewish piety. It's a lot. So that was, okay, Daniel. So the dominant story in Daniel is all about the apocalypse. Ezra and Nehemiah, they're kind of books that are endowed with this idea of like divine wisdom. And then you come down to Chronicles 1 and Chronicles 2, which are also history. Hmm? Haggai is in the middle of Nevi'im, so that's a prophet. So everything Isaiah down to Malachi are all prophets, all prophecy. Daniel, so Daniel is just, it's just known as like in a book about the apocalypse, right? It's not considered poetry. It's not considered wisdom literature. It's just apocalypse. That's why the Ketuvim is a little bit like more like miscellaneous in nature. It's kind of a lot of things in one section. And then you also asked about Ezra and Nehemiah. That's like divine wisdom, but it's not, you go through the books, it's kind of endowed with divine wisdom. It's not like necessarily just, you know, God talking to us, but it's like the character of Daniel is considered to be endowed with this divine wisdom. Nima. So Joshua Second Kings is all history. Prophecy, correct. You got it. History, the first part, all prophets, the next. I think no, probably. I mean, I don't make up these titles. It's just kind of like, that's what it's referred to. I mean, really, when you think of Esther, you kind of just think of a tale in historical basis, right? You don't really think of it. I don't usually think of it as a book of wisdom, usually Esther. But if we were technically writing it, that's how it would be. I hope that's a good enough answer. I mean, any other questions about these? Okay. So while we're going through this part, I want you to turn to page 30. Turn to page 32. And now these are there are 5 Megillot. Now, a Megillah, that is another word you want to know. A Megillah is a scroll. So the Torah, you know, if they're 2 wooden poles, they're called Atzei Chaim, the tree of life. It's made from wood. There's 2 of them in the Torah. Scroll has only 1. And is not kept in like the Ark, the Aron. So these are the 5 Megillot, the 5 scrolls. They are all part of Ketuvim, the book of writings, this 3rd section. So these 5, the interesting thing with these scrolls is they're all associated with a certain holiday. So we start with Song of Songs. So I think I said last time that I will give you some Hebrew whenever I can. So Song of Songs is called Shir Hashirim. Oh, that one's dead. Song of Songs, Shir Hashirim. And this is really extensive imagery of springtime. The holiday it's associated with is Pesach or Passover. And the theme of Pesach is this idea of like national rebirth, liberation, and that's kind of mirrored by like nature's rebirth coming after, you know, a long sleepy winter, right? Waking up, rebirth. So that is Shir Hashirim, Song of Songs. Then you come up with Ruth, which is just the book of Ruth. There's no Hebrew for that, except for Ruth. And that is for Shavuot, usually occurs sometime, usually very end of May, June is when Shavuot occurs. And that's the story of an individual accepting Torah, converting to Judaism, being accepted by the Jewish people. And it's interesting because the holiday it commemorates is the Jewish community, right? The Jewish people's acceptance of Torah, right? That we got at Har Sinai, at Mount Sinai. So it's an interesting thing of reading of an individual when it's really our celebration of like our collective acceptance of the Torah. Then we move down to Lamentations. The Lamentations in Hebrew. So this is where the CH is not a cha, but a cha. That's Echa. Echa, Lamentations. So we read the Megillah of Eicha on Tisha B'Av, which is a fast day. And it really retells the story of the destruction of the first temple by the Babylonians. And a lot of people look at fast days, aside from Yom Kippur, especially Tisha B'Av, as commemorating all Jewish tragedies, just throughout time. But it really specifically is about both the first and the second temple's destruction. Okay, the next one is Ecclesiastes. In Hebrew, it's written Kohelet, but it really is Kohelet. But that's how you would write the English, Kohelet. And this one is associated with the holiday of Sukkot in the fall, which occurs in the fall. And it really emphasizes like the fragility of everything in life. Things are temporary, very fragile. And the symbol for this is a sukkah, right? The holiday is called Sukkot, which really means booths. And a singular one is a sukkah. Sukkah, I can write it for you in English, right? Sukkah, which is the hut, right? Or the booth. And Sukkot is just the plural. Just write booths. Huts, booths, right? A hut or a booth. And so we use that symbol. Oops. So this is really where the book that's, for everything there is a season to live, a season to die. And part of this is also really focusing on enjoying life while you're here, right? Enjoy food, enjoy drink, enjoy your friends, be happy. And that's really what that book is all about. And then the final one we move to is Esther, Megillat Esther, which is coming up. Purim, which is March 16th. So we do not have class that night. So I really hope you will all join us that night to celebrate Purim. It's a really fun holiday. And that's the story of the salvation of the Persian Jewish community from the evil Haman who plotted against the Jewish people. The interesting thing is when you so even though these are all considered scrolls and they're all referred to as a Megillah, like Megillat Ruth, Megillat Esther, and everything. When you say the Megillah, by like default, people assume you were referring to Megillat Esther. I'm not sure how that became, but that's just, we're reading the Megillah. Which Megillah? It's going to be Esther, right? That's just the way it works. So those are your 5 Megillot, again, all contained in the book of Ketuvim in the 3rd section in writings. So I want to give you guys a couple minutes. Well, we went through a lot. But if you want to just pass around, if everyone hasn't had a chance to maybe look through, if you want to pass around, some are English, like I said, some are Hebrew and English, just so everybody can kind of see how it's all put together, all 3 sections. And there is something we're not going through in class today, but on page 33, there is just an excerpt from Megillat Ruth, which again is the story of the individual woman accepting the Jewish faith upon herself, being accepted to the Jewish people. So it's included here, just something, to take a look at, to read at some point on your own. Okay, so last week we went through the Torah, which you might have thought that was a lot to go through the Torah in one time. Now we're going to go through even more of history. We're going to go through all of Nevi'im and Ketuvim, basically, all in like 10 minutes. So there's obviously a lot of things I'm skipping over, but again, this is just about an overview, a bird's eye view. So this would be, you do not have to follow along. Not everybody is a timeline person. I'm definitely not, but it is here for you on page 28 and 29 if you do want to follow along or take any notes. So last week, we basically got up through, we had the Exodus of Egypt, And that was, we did Exodus to Egypt, and we got up to the very end where Moses passed away, right? And right on the cusp of going to Israel. And that's where the journey ended in the 5 books of the Torah. The rest of the Torah is where we now pick up, right? So we're starting in Nevi'im, the prophets, and these books really describe the history of the Jewish people right after Moses' death. And they talk about, we had this word last week. I'm going to put it up, see if anybody remembers the word. Free. Yes, covenant. All right. So these books really talk about the covenantal relationship of the people with God, and really in action with God, and in I won't say conversation, but it's really, they are in conversation through the prophets, so right, in dialogue with God through the prophets. And really, it presents Israel's history in their own land. So historically, as I said, Nevi'im began with the conquest of Eretz Israel under the leadership of Joshua. So right now I'm in the 1200s on this chart, 12 to 1025, period of the Judges, right? It begins with the conquest of Israel under Joshua, which is Moses' successor. And the most famous battle here is Battle of Jericho. And it concludes with the prophecies of Malachi, which is the last prophet that, if you look in that book of Nevi'im, and his prophecy around the rebuilding of the temple when the Jews returned in 515 BC. I am going to give you a little bit more than just that, but that takes you through the whole thing. So Judaism, so if you look if you turn back one page and you just look in Nevi'im, there's no specific divisions, you just see it all together. But if you study it, it's really kind of divided into 2 sections. It's called Nevi'im Rishonim, the former prophets, and Nevi'im Achronim. You don't have to write this down even, it's fine, the latter prophets. The Nevi'im Rishonim consists of prose work, and it's really about the historical narrative. That's Joshua, Judges, Samuel, Kings, which is why I labeled this beginning part all history. The Nevi'im Achronim is more about the literary prophets and their prophecies to the people. So the Nevi'im Rishonim, the former prophets, really describes the transition from the tribal confederation, the 12 tribes, to the monarchy under King Saul and King David. And now we're at around 1025 to maybe 928 BCE, that whole period. And then it also goes to the division of the 2 kingdoms under King Solomon, who was David's son. So if you see, we're kind of in the right side of the left page, is where we are in here. So King David was known as a great warrior of Israel. He expanded the borders, and the big thing that he did was he established Jerusalem as the capital. King Solomon, he was a much more peaceful ruler, and he built the Beit HaMikdash. And that is a word to know. Beit HaMikdash is the temple. So just so you know, for those of you who might know Hebrew or are learning Hebrew, so Beit or Bayit means house. For example, a synagogue is called the Beit Knesset, a house of gathering. Beit HaMikdash. So this word is kind of similar to a word Kodesh in Hebrew, which, and if you're learning Hebrew, you would see the root in it, which means holy. So Beit HaMikdash really means temple of the holiness. So the holy temple. So Beit HaMikdash, the temple. And he built the Beit HaMikdash and the temple, and he really unified at this point the Israelite worship. People at this point were still known as the Israelites. So we move now in our timeline to about 950 BCE, when King Solomon really centralized the Israelite religion with the construction of the Beit HaMikdash, the temple. And this was thought that this is really where God's spirit was housed. This is where you could go to pray. Prayer at that point was in the form of worship, but this is the closest point you could get to God. So as I just said, The form of worship at the time is through something called a korban, which is known as a sacrifice. This prayer actually became prayer later, once the temples were destroyed, replaced sacrifices. Korban. And the Kohanim, whoops, that's not right. So, yes, exactly. Somebody just said it. So the Kohanim, so I wrote it in quotation marks. So the Kohanim, the priests, they were the ones in charge of the sacrifice, but they're priests, not in the sense of what a priest is today, but they're priests because they were able to trace themselves back to the lineage of Moses's brother Aaron. So they come from the priestly family. And during that time, they had certain, they were like the highest level. The priests were the highest level. They were in charge. You know, the sacrifices were brought, the gifts to the temple, the gifts were given to them. So that's why I wrote it priest, just because it's a completely different. I mentioned it in the religious school, and I said that Kohanim mean priests. And they're like, priests? What? I just thought we didn't have priests in Judaism. And I was like, it's not that priest. So, you know. So then we move to about 928, which is after King Solomon dies. And the kingdom, the Israelite kingdom is really split into two. 10 of the tribes go to the north, they're called Israel. 2 of the tribes go south, called Judah. And then we will move towards the right-hand side of the page now, page 29. 722, you come to the conquest of the northern kingdom of Israel by the Assyrian Empire. Then we move to 586, which is the end of the southern kingdom of Judah at the hands of the Babylonian Empire. 586 is also the destruction of the first temple. And then we move to 515, which is when they start the reconstruction of the second temple. And in response to basically the increasing need, the Jewish people being spread out, what started to happen is the oral Torah. So the Torah was passed down, you know, by mouth orally. It started to be written down. So it had to be canonized, but all of it was collected. We always say it was passed from generation to generation, lador vador. I'll write that for you, so you have that. I'll write that here. Lador from generation to generation. But people were very spread out now, and the Jewish people kind of needed a way to kind of spread Judaism, but what if you weren't near the people who knew it to tell it to you? So it started to be written down, and the first references really to this written Torah, which is what we have today, which was read out loud by the people Israel, is around this time. And as you'll see, it's 450 BCE, canonization of the Torah under Ezra. So one of the interesting things is, so the Torah is read 3 times a week. It's read on Shabbat, and it's read on Monday and Thursday. Anybody know why it's read on Monday and Thursdays? Not supposed to go 72 hours without reading the Torah, but why Monday and Thursday though? Could have been a different day.
People will come to market.
That's right. So those are the days, yes, where people would come together, exactly. So those are the reasons that was, so it's 72 hours, but those days specifically, because that was when they came to the market. So you just made up a word. I mean, you brought up a word. Minion.
Tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock.
Which is, sorry, that's a Q. Hold on. Quorum? AM? Quorum? I don't know how to spell quorum. Is it an AM? There we go. Quorum, right? So you need 10 people to pray, to say certain prayers, to read the Torah, to say the blessings. And these days at the market, when the marketplace, when people come, they would have the minyan, and that's why it was read. So the written Torah really allowed the Jews to be Jewish anywhere they settled and anywhere they went. And this was kind of really also the beginning in Judaism of the trend of really adaptation of survival, right? And to survive in whatever context or whatever historical things happen. This was kind of the beginning of a trend that we see all throughout Judaism, this way to adapt. Again, when they gave Hamikdash, right? When the temple was gone, could no longer bring sacrifices, switched out to prayer, which we now have in the Siddur. So on one foot, al regel achat, right? That is the history. Let it digest. Yes, buddy. Oral.
People explaining their own interpretations of what was going on,
Again,
because there was nothing definitive written there.
there was nothing definitive, but that was the whole oral tradition. So yes, because as we know in the game of telephone, right? Starts here, it's not going to come out there. So yes, was it the exact word that maybe Moses heard? Probably not, but the idea was the same. But as we know, when you pass it along, you do put in your own interpretation, right? But the idea was to stick to that same idea, but that's why people were becoming so spread out, they had to then write it down.
Is that why there's so many interpretations of the Torah? People can interpret it differently?
Well, but yes, but that's based on now the written word, whatever we have written, those are the words we now interpret.
That's what I'm saying.
Yes.
Like, they knew it wasn't that, that was hard, so they can be
So you can still interpret it, correct?
interpreted.
And ask questions, exactly. Yes. All right, so I gave you a lot of information. It's a perfect time for a little stretch break. If you want to go to the bathroom, there's bathrooms on both sides. There's water, candy, take a stretch break. Savannah and David will reconvene in like 8:17. Sounds good. Perfect name for a book for this class. Al regel achat. Whole course is al regel achat. It's like. Me? Hold on.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, yes, yes.
Yes.
Hang on, this is called Jaguar.
Well,
Jaguar.
Jaguar?
It's about a bunch of road.
Oh. McCarthy or it's like historical.
It's historical.
Got it.
Names, key names. There's this dialogue. They're not Nazi hunters, but reasons on.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyhow, long story short, they're sitting in this house. And two guys are arguing. He goes, "How many I said, two guys are arguing.
You weren't there. You weren't anywhere. It's
The more common.
like a tough pill to swallow for a lot of people. Yeah, for sure. No, I totally get it. Yeah. Correct, but it's not. It's kind of like a gut punch in a way. Yeah, no, for sure. Absolutely. Thank you.
You know, it's like different. So that's what they did for a living. Went to a big digital class. And they had a lot of fun. They went, it was big, but it was only a couple hundred. You created I will be back with everybody
All right, so yes. One more time. Yes. Yep, for the tree of life, absolutely. Thanks for asking. So it is, I'm gonna write it here. I'm gonna go to ancient Israel. It's a good thing I got a bigger blackboard this week, a whiteboard. So the singular, right, is ETZ, etz, Chaim. Tree of life. It's Chaim. Some people, again, because it's English, it's not, exactly. Some people spell this. I've seen it EYTZ, so that you kind of, it's eights. I've also seen it, however you remember best, EITZ. So eights, Chaim.
And you were talking about that.
Yes, so the what's it called in English? The rollers, I don't exactly know what it's called. I only know the Hebrew word. But each one is considered a tree of life. So it's called Atzei Chaim, which is plural. So each is a tree of life because the Torah is considered, right, our tree of life or connection. So it's are they called not a dowel? I don't know. It's for rollers. No, that's about the Torah. These are the holders. So the trees, like a tree of life is holding the tree of life in a way. It's Eitz Chaim He is about the Torah. It is a tree of life. But the wooden things that hold it, because it comes from a tree from wood, it's also called Eitz Chaim or Atzei Chaim. Does that make sense? Okay, good question. Great question. All right, we're going to go into the books. We're going to go back to Chavruta. Does everybody know what Chavruta? Remember what that is? That is the group work. The group work, right? Working with like a friend, a partner in discussion. So in your books, we're going to read, I'm going to give you some time with your partner. You can get up, find somebody you haven't maybe studied with, haven't met yet. I'm going to give you a good amount of time because you're going to read page 30 and page 31. Page 30 is what we're talking again about prophets today. So this is What Manner of Man is the Prophet by Rabbi Joshua Heschel, who is a very big spiritual giant in the 20th century. And he was also very involved in things dealing with social justice and civil rights movement. So you're going to read that. You're also going to read page 31. Is this the fast I have chosen? So this is actually something that we read on Yom Kippur, the day that we are fasting. I'm going to have you read that. And then the bottom of your book, are there discussion questions? Yes, great. So if you want to read those discussion questions, which is drawing from Isaiah and Heschel, these two readings, how do you understand the role of the prophets? And who, in your opinion, are some contemporary heirs of prophets? So I'll give you some time if you want to. What? Right. I just didn't know what the English word of it was. If it's a roller or shaft? Shafts? Sounds nicer in Hebrew. There are things that I realize, like when this comes up, that like I don't know the English word for it. So there's like no English word for it. I mean, so yeah, you have some time to get up, move around, find a partner, a chavruta, study buddy, and let's take like 15 minutes, and then we'll come back and we'll discuss it. Yeah, read first. Yep. Read first, take notes, and then you can find a partner to discuss it with.
I don't know, I'll never know.
Yeah. Yeah, you're fine. You're fine. Thank you. Oh, I hope she feels better. We'll shalom to her. So we will take about 5 more minutes and then we'll come together and discuss a little bit. All right, have we all finished discussing? Yeah, okay. All right. I did notice that nobody got up and moved to a new partner, but that's okay. I'm gonna figure out better ways to do it in the future to make you move. Okay, so we read a bunch of text and hopefully you were discussing it. So let's go with the first question. Drawing from Isaiah and Heschel, how do you understand the role of the prophets? I will just open it up to whatever you've been discussing. Yes, Barbara.
They thought they were the voice of God. In other words, what they were saying was what God wanted them to say. If you do not do A, B, and C, Israel will be destroyed. And then if you do, the prophecy said, Israel, you will come back to Israel. So they kind of, it was just the voice of God now. It's a different, it's not Moses anymore. It's prophets who are telling them what's going to happen or not happen if you do this or if you don't do this.
Great, thank you. Yes.
That was a little more general than that. How do you understand the job description of the prophet? That's what drawing attention to evil.
Drawing attention to evil, okay, or calling it out maybe, yeah. And what? Confronting injustice, yeah, absolutely. Whistleblowers, and what was the third thing? Even at the risk of, they're like, yeah, whistleblowers, absolutely, right? They're kind of like social critics in a way, right? They call people out. Are they predictors of the future? Are they not predictors of the future? Any thoughts on that? Did that come up for any of you? Not predictors, or it didn't come up? It didn't come up. So now I'll bring that up.
They weren't. I think they would say, what would happen if this, you do this, like you say, if you do this, then this will happen. If you don't do this, this will happen. So they're trying to forecast the future. They don't know this natural.
Yes, forecast is more the word, right? Because we don't want to look at somebody as like, if they can predict the future, then we kind of ascribe too much attention to them. But yes, like they could foresee or forecast what could be. What else came up in your discussions? Anybody? Yes, Stephen. So you're the next one. Okay, so we'll get to you. Hold on, let's just, and they also, the prophet, it was the advocate for God to the people and the people to God. Prophet like went between both ways, right? Did anybody talk about that? Did that come up at all? Okay, if it's in. Yes.
It
ma'am.
felt like they were seeing the voice of God, like not so much like, people were supposed to treat them like God, but they thought, they were like predicting the future based on what God was saying. Like,
Great, thank you. Okay, yes. Yes. Sure. Where they really felt it, the prophets, the social, like the injustices in general. Great, thank you. Mm-hmm.
Reminding us to look at what we're doing, take a step back, think about what we're doing. And it seems like historically, it's easy for humans to forget on matters. Short way to say it, yeah.
Sometimes you need that person there to call you out, right? Like,
Yeah.
great, that was great. Thank you so much. Okay, let's move on to the next question, right? Which is, who, in your opinion, are some contemporary heirs of the prophet? So since you guys can start that discussion. There's no right or wrong answer. Anyone from the prophets till now. However you define it, totally fine. Tell me why though. I mean, just great, yeah, wonderful, thank you. Martin Luther King and Abraham Joshua Heschel were actually friends.
If they're not really righteous themselves, then we wouldn't be saying.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm. Okay. Yes. Why?
Because he's, I mean, in his view, he is, from God, but I think he's a righteous person, and he, speaks out, against injustice. He's experienced injustice, so, speaks out against it, and, a lot of people listen.
Yep. Beth and then Bunny.
We also, we're talking about people we thought like Mother Teresa, and
Mhm.
I'm thinking of people who other people could look at as a prophet, they're not necessarily a prophet, like the president of the United States should be the one carrying out to make sure that there are no social injustices.
Mm-hmm.
He should be a righteous person, he or she should be a righteous
Mhm.
person. They're not necessarily that, but that is what a contemporary role I think. And then we went
Interesting.
a little even more broad, and we were thinking of like people who are selfless,
Selfless.
and give up to go help other people, like Doctors Without Borders.
Mhm.
Like here, doctors are really put on a high pedestal, so they are high. People listen to them, and yet these people will leave their lives and go help people who really need help to try to even out these stuff.
Great, thank you, Bunny.
Well, you had briefly just mentioned the name, Mother Teresa. I think she was an excellent, representation of a prophet, bringing attention to the needs of the poor,
Mhm.
and that the rich are a little bit too rich and they need to be sharing more of what they have. So,
Did you have a hand? Yep, Barbara. Gandhi. And why Gandhi?
He was man of peace. Back then, when it was so white and amazing, but this man believed, and he believed in peace.
Mm-hmm.
He probably was maybe I'm thinking off the top of my head, he may have been closer to Isaiah and the kinds of things that he thought and did, and he was a very humble man, lived in great solid many years.
Great, these are great. Maddie.
I was just thinking, bouncing back on the first question.
Yeah.
Or in the Torah, you know, how we say, I'm gonna flood the earth.
Mm-hmm.
The way God interacts with the people changed, and the whole premise, I think, of Judaism is you have to do these rituals so that you don't forget, so that you can remember when you did these things before you can remember what happened. You
Mm-hmm.
have to remember. And so the role of the prophet, or essentially the motivational speaker, is like, don't you remember, like, it's happening again. Do you remember what happened last time? It's kind of that same, like, you have to continually be reminded of rituals that you need to
Motivational speaker. I love, no, I never thought of it that way, but it's so true, right? I love that.
Remembering it. If there's something we need people to point out.
You forget, absolutely. Is there a hand over here? Ben and then Jonathan? Or Jonathan, you're gonna go? The safe space?
The concept of righteous
Yeah,
needs to be defined.
okay.
Because I'm gonna say that you all you would strive to be out of the point of the problem is the value component of righteous. I
Mm-hmm.
would argue that those who are white supremacists,
Mm-hmm.
you, your leaders, right? And you, your ideas,
Mm-hmm.
as prophecy, and you're the one that's
Mm-hmm.
hold on.
Safe space. Safe space. Everybody.
And eventually, the message he gives to us.
Mhm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. You don't own what? The term, yep. Mm-hmm. Right. No, that's great. I appreciate that. No, it's something I never thought about. But you're right. And I think Beth, you even said like it should maybe be the president, but we don't normally think of that in that case. That's great. Thank you. Ben? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I was thinking about it, no matter who I thought, I was thinking I had someone obviously famous, right?
Mm-hmm.
Moved a lot of people. But anytime I came up with someone, I thought, well, that's too political, I don't even want to talk about them. But the prophets were pretty political.
Absolutely.
I like Jordan Peterson a lot. Maybe because like more conservative leading, but even critical psychiatrist, elements. He does a lot of this, like calling out, like make your own bed before you call other people out for what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And, he does a lot of like introspective, why do we do things the way we do? And like, he asks a lot of questions that I really think are like very interesting. But yeah, anytime I thought of like several people, one way or the other, like they're either like Bernie Sanders or whoever, it's like they're right. There's no middle. It's like very inflammatory these days to think about. But that's what the prophets are. They're kind of like very inflammatory people.
Absolutely.
But I thought, yeah, that's what it is.
I think in a way we try to think that, oh, prophets, these nice people. But when you really read the stories, they are like very inflammatory and they're very offended by everything and like, right, they get hot and bothered by things. Very right. No, totally.
Would you consider Rabbi Sneerson as a prophet per se, or not as far as his description?
I think his people probably did. the people that followed him, I think probably did.
But he wasn't mean or nasty or, to my knowledge, he wasn't, flamboyant. so
Right.
to speak. But he managed to get a lot of people to believe.
A lot of
that
followers
one-
and a lot of people to follow
So
him.
would he be considered a prophet too, or not really?
I mean, I don't think we really consider anybody a prophet these days, but that's why I think his followers probably would. Just like you were saying, political followers consider this person or this person, people might consider their rabbis prophets or this. And people in like Rabbi Schneerson's movement probably do really look up to him, followed him, everything he said and everything. So I don't, but his people probably did.
But he appears to me to be more of a gentle
Mhm.
person and get things done in a positive way rather than a negative
Sure,
and abusive way.
correct.
Like some of
Which are
these-
like these kind of prophets that we're talking
Right, that
about.
we read about were more abusive in their
I mean, they
language
really
or-
saw Rabbi Schneerson as more the Messiah though,
Yeah.
and not a prophet.
Okay,
So,
no, so,
yeah, they would
okay,
see him as the Messiah, not a prophet in that sense.
If you go back in American U.S. history, yeah, in the Mormon faith, I think I'm gonna say this correctly, it's Joseph Smith was viewed as a prophet, was he not? And he was a prophet of that whole time and era where he developed his.
And he called people, I don't know who that is, but he called people out. He was that type of prophet, called people out, self-proclaimed. Got it.
But he was a prophet of the Mormon church and still is. I think there's
Mm.
a book, an older book about him.
Yeah.
Right.
Interesting. Please. Mm.
I mean, prophets out of what they it's a miserable life for them. They're feeling these intense feelings all the time. Like, it's much fun. So
Correct.
sometimes it's not how
Mhm.
what they do.
It's a good point.
And one thing that
Good point.
I appreciated when we hear what the
Mhm.
events they had was when the synagogue comes to do charity and to do a mitzvah and to help the shelter. They've done things for the animal shelters
Yeah.
here and all the things that they've done here. There is no game. The temple is not selling.
Mhm.
Whereas when you're in another organization, here I brought you food, stay for this meeting afterward and we'll tell you about it.
Mhm.
Whereas I think that there wasn't.
Mhm.
But it's not. It's a
Right.
It seemed that, yes, their manner of act was a little more pointed, but they were also gifted with
Yeah.
this intense sensitivity. I think that, maybe it's this process. Some people.
Right. That's a great point. That was a fantastic discussion. Thank you. Like, I think a lot of different things, sounds like groups were talking about a lot of different things. Various nuances here and there came up, and I think it was a great discussion. So yeah, thank you all for it. Things that I haven't thought about either.
Major problem with it, I know with the poetry and stuff, I can't understand half of what they're saying.
Correct.
Why is it so
Totally.
difficult for the common person to try to figure out what's being said, whether it's this poem or the Torah poem?
Totally get it, but that's kind of what Beth said with commentary, right? So you have something, it is like, I mean, you have to read it. I underline, I put highlighters, right? Like to figure out what is it really saying to like, break it all down. But that is why you have so much commentary though, because there are people who really like to read it and really like can decipher it and understand it and put it in like layman's language.
But in our news to war.
Shalom, shalom, yep.
You know, besides telling us what it's about, on the
Yes.
side, there is a new commentary that,
Correct.
like, I had never known anything about that before reading, you know, before having our news before. That's brand new commentary. You know, to think that they could still be, you know, coming up with what that form means or what that person meant or thought meant at that point.
Yeah.
I think it's very interesting, and that's, again, why we keep asking questions, why.
Absolutely. Look, we report every single year. The words in Torah never change. The same words every year. But we are coming to it differently and we change. So what we read and what we understand and what affects us constantly changes. Anima.
So I know there is a difference. What is like the fundamental difference between the prophet and the Messiah? Like, wouldn't the Messiah kind of be like a prophet?
Well, the prophet, again, the whole idea with the prophet was this person who's coming and critiquing, and it is like in an inflammatory way in the Bible, right? And critiquing and reminding, you know, you're supposed to do this. If you do this, this is going to happen. If you don't do this, this is going to happen. Where the Messiah is really for the future, coming, right? The future, not in that way. The Messiah is supposed to bring like world peace. Like that was never part of like the prophets, you know. But the Messiah is supposed to be like for this future state of like, every the way I understand it, I understand it to entertain. Did you want to say something about that? Oh, wait, does anybody else want to say? And then we'll move on. So that's to my understanding. It's when the Messiah comes, all is going to be right with the world. And that was never one of the prophetic messages. You know, if you don't do right, do something good, bad will happen. But they never said like, you know, if you follow everything, it's just that is true too. That is a good point.
Like maybe one the prophet, like everybody knows what the prophet said.
Yeah, it could be that would bring maybe one day the Messiah, right? And all the Jews would return to Israel, and we would rebuild the third temple, right, and everything. Howard.
The one thing about they have major
Mm-hmm.
and problem, they work for an impossible.
God.
Yeah. I mean, they would want me to do this, and do that, and do that. You think I like the smell of those spices? You think I feel that you slaughtered all these animals?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. I don't maybe matter if somebody said it was a very difficult job, right? Not an easy job, not something that you would want. Very difficult life. Yeah. All right. So before we wrap up, I just want to kind of go around one more time. We went over a lot here. So if you can just take a moment to think about something in the class today that was that you learned, that interested you, that surprised you. You can interested, surprised, you learned. Do any of those three. And I won't always make the end people start. Oh, good. Mm-hmm.
Elijah, a couple of Elijah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, and the Messiah can come until the prophet Elijah returns. So
Great.
in those ways, he was much more important than some of the other guys.
Great. We do bring him up all the time. You're right. Absolutely. Stephanie?
I learned that there's a different way of looking at the actual prophet. The
Mm.
whole idea, like you brought up, the fact that for some, competency
Mhm.
in that same vein, it depends on what you're focused,
Absolutely.
whether or not that person is actually keeping their people focused on whatever their purpose.
Great. Thank you. Heidi?
I guess
with a little bit of the timeline, I learned that about, the origin of the Torah itself and how it converts from oral tradition to, written, and I guess a little bit of oral tradition that we have today. So it's just-
Great, thank you, Harris.
I guess I learned that there was more than one Megillah. I always just thought, use the term just for the one.
Yeah,
And I've referred to all the other books, their respective names for that. So I guess, Megillah can represent multiple things.
great, thank you. Julie?
I guess I never really thought that deeply about what is a prophet.
Great, thank you.
Actually, I was gonna say the same thing. I went up to the yellow page. I always thought Song of Songs, Book of Ruth.
Yeah,
I just always thought, we read the Megillah. That's
Yeah.
what I said, okay, that's what we're gonna read the Megillah. They never say we're gonna read the extra Megillah. So that was very,
great, thank you. Annie?
I guess it's the breakdown of the Tanakh. The first five books of Moses and then Nevi'im and are all probably Haftorahs and how they relate to the reading of the week of the Torah. And,
Yep. Thank you for that. I know this is full, but one more time, thank you very much, Lenny, actually. Haftarah. Some people write it Haftarah. Some people write, that's in Hebrew. Haftorah is more in English. So each week when we read a story from the Torah, from the first 5 books, afterwards we have another reading, separate reading called the Haftorah. And that is from Nevi'im, from the book of prophets, and it relates some way. Sometimes it relates very closely. What? Sometimes it's a stretch. So it could be the story is related, a character is related, a type of event is related, the season, time of year. Again, sometimes much more closely related, some not as much. So thank you for bringing that word up, actually. Barbara.
I think the same thing is about the Megillah. I always thought it was the Megillah of Esther. The other books were just the other books. And if somebody said, I happen to have a Megillah, it's the book of Esther, though.
Yeah.
But that's, yeah.
and Yiddish, there's a Ganze Megillah.
Ganze Megillah, the whole Megillah.
that's what many of us have learned going through, Hebrew school or learning, there's some sort of breakdown on it because a whole bunch of us didn't know that.
Well, so it's interesting when you say that, because if I'm thinking about like in the religious school, right? We don't teach, because they're so limited in time. We don't teach them about Song of Songs. We don't even, maybe we touch upon Ruth, but usually Shavuot comes before school ends, right? We don't really talk about Kohelet. It's up here, it's such high level for the kids. We don't really talk about Eicha. But you're right? It's crazy that we don't know it, but yet, yeah, but it's very interesting. It actually made me think now also, like, yes, correct. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah. Did you go, Panema? No, go ahead.
I've learned a lot. But something I like
Okay, thank you, Megan.
just understanding more the role of the topic and the discussion around it. I thought very interesting. And again, this is all very new to me, so it was good to follow along.
Great. Ken.
Yeah, something I thought was interesting, kind of like now from conversation.
Mhm.
It made me realize like you don't have other
Great, wonderful. Patty.
So 2 things. One, my perception of prophets in the past, up until today, has been more of like crystal ball reading, like looking into the future and, this is going to happen, and it was, explained in great detail, some future event. But now I see them more as the cause or action, reaction, cause and effect. If this is done, you can expect that this is done. If not done, you can expect this instead. A little more down to earth, grounded type of forecast.
And then the other is, I'm reading with a question that, thanks to Jonathan, what does righteous really mean? So now I'm gonna go explore that, thank you, Jonathan, to explore more, to really have a better understanding of what righteousness means.
Excellent, wonderful.
Well,
Yeah, so cool. Yeah. I mean, we were talking earlier, like, where she was, explaining, language cultivates.
Mhm.
Well, the language that we use today, America, is different than the way it's today. And I said, when I was playing college baseball, we go out and share balls. And he said, Karen, I only know the English definition of that from, Howard, right?
yeah. Yeah, what does that mean? I don't even, what does that mean though? I don't know what that means either. Oh, I didn't know. I also know it from Austin Powers. Good point, very good point, Dal. Maddie. Mm. Mm-hmm. Go ahead, yeah, Christopher.
So, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
Wisdom. Expose her.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. Yeah, Jennifer.
I just feel like you know, learn more about the historical biblical context that is showing up. I mean, I think first community confirmation that is much diving into, especially the people.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mhm. Great, wonderful. Karen.
I can't believe I was. And what's the matter with this?
Great, wonderful.
Unbelievable.
I'm also kind of now thinking what I need to add to the religious school curriculum. No, but it's helpful hearing all these things, right? Like, it's really helpful. I mean, so yeah, wonderful. Thank you. Ben. That's fine. Thank you. Stephen. Mm. Mm-hmm.
Possibly. I don't know. A little.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. Jonathan.
Your position is very enlightening. And what I've been pondering is the role of faith
Mm-hmm.
between when the stories began to be shared narratively to when they were written down,
Mm-hmm.
and the degree to which one has to have faith that those stories actually represent what was talked
Great
about
point.
1,000, 1,500 years ago. And as a personal issue, it is a struggle for me not to apply the way I have been taught to think about memory and language today, and not have that interfere
Sure.
with understanding this information.
Great, thank you, Ben. We have a lot of Bens here. Just saying, a lot of Bens.
Dyslexia, yeah, when you toil with next starting written down, and my understanding is that's where we got to conversation. How, the telephone game and how stories are understood the oral Torah,
Mm-hmm.
and special people to like memorize all this. On who was most accurate to the source material, and it's funny because, Jonathan was sitting there, and well, my cynicism says otherwise, when we think of like, oh, it's not just not just the words and meanings change, the context of stories change too, effects. So that was just seeing seeing like other people's reactions to the same things that I've been taught in school too. Yeah, so that's what I'm getting out of this class that I like.
Thank you, Rebecca.
We said a couple times before, when like the discussion process, people say here, I like that it's really grounded and it's really more stuff.
Great. Well, thank you. This was like this. I have to say this discussion about the prophets was a fascinating discussion. I actually was not sure what was going to come out of it and where it was going to go. I've never really had that conversation in this context. So thank you. I just feel like I learned a lot, have a lot more terminology also used. So thank you all so much. And I just want to say good night and just let you know, I will send you tomorrow the new syllabus, but the reading for next time is called, in your books, is called 2 Jews, 3 Opinions. Probably should be called 2 Jews, 20 Opinions, but have a great night. Oh, if you could leave your name tags in the back and then you'll collect them next week again. Thank you guys. Have a good night. Goodbye, David. Have a good night.